I have here today Michael Blute. We're delighted to have him. He's sitting here beside me in the BJUI office. We're going to just talk a little bit about, first of all, Michael, if I can talk to you about your early days in the States and your schooling and then medical education.
Well, thank you, John. Thank you for inviting me. I'm an American boy, grew up in Massachusetts, was schooled in Worcester, Massachusetts, went to Holy Cross College, graduated from there. I'm sort of a Jesuit-trained urologist, moved from Holy Cross. I played football, had a terrific injury doing that, which cut short my football playing career. But the important thing about that story is I met an Irish orthopedic surgeon who told me, Michael, if you're ever interested in medical school, there's this wonderful college, the Royal College of Surgeons in Dublin. You ought to talk to me about it. And that's what led me to consider a medical career. And I came over here, sat for the exams, and was accepted into the Royal College of Surgeons. And that began a long love affair with Dublin, and even to the point where my son graduated in 1996. He qualified from the college.
Yeah.
So we're very proud of that heritage and those ties to Dublin. So I'm glad to be here.
Jesuit education obviously puts a mark on one. What sort of a mark did that leave on you?
You're right. I mean, schools you in all the arts. It's important. I graduated with an AB in chemistry, not a Bachelor of Sciences. So obviously Latin, French, the philosophies, a lot of literature was involved. I became very interested in military and political history.
But let's trace on with your medical education, because obviously this is a stellar career, and I wanted to see if we can see where it led to from medical schools.
Well, after medical school, I knew I wanted to be a surgeon. That was easy. I come from a family of surgeons, with my father being a urologist, my older brother's a urologist, and so it was easy for me to, I think, gravitate to a surgical field. I wasn't, however, initially convinced that I was going to be a urologist. And actually I had no pressures to become a urologist given the history of my family in urology. After trying all sorts of subsurgical specialties, I really did come back to urology and see it as the most exciting career for me personally. And I don't think I've been wrong in choosing that as a career.
Was that a personal choice, or was there anybody who might have influenced you to maybe select urology?
Obviously, I grew up with urology, given that my dad was a urologist and my older brother, and they were the first to introduce me to the love of urology that they had. Pretty natural for me to go ahead and proceed along those lines, and it was always interesting and always helpful to use them as family mentors. But I've been lucky in my career. I've had a lot of great family mentors and professional mentors. I was struck, being from the East, by the quality of training and the volume and variety of training that I would receive at the Mayo Graduate School of Medicine. So I applied there. I'm not sorry for having done that also, because it gave an outstanding training in surgical specialty of urology.
So who was David Utes the head then?
Yeah, Dave Utes was head, and he knew my father, had met my father, and Dave Utes was head at that time, but I had a lot of mentors that were senior at the time. Joe Segura comes to mind, Horst Zinke, Robert Myers, Dave Barrett, Mike Lieber, a whole host of seniors that were wonderful mentors to train under. And I think I carry a bit of each one of them throughout my career.
I suppose I can just put in another plug for Dublin here to say that David Utes' successor, Pan Kalalis, was a graduate of Trinity College Dublin. So
that's true, and Panis was a great friend and mentor also, and actually was chairman when I joined the staff at the Mayo Clinic.
Did you do a fellowship anywhere, or did you just stick?
No, in those days I think that fellowship wasn't as strong a commitment as I think today it may be, particularly if you want to do academic or scholarly urology. I had the opportunity to do some scholarly activity at the Mayo early on, and was able to carry it out through working with Don Tyndall and the basic scientists at Mayo Clinic, and working many years towards a SPORE, which ultimately was achieved. We were very proud of that. I was department chairman at the time. Couldn't have done it without the leadership and foresight of someone like Don Tyndall. It's been exciting, and it's really been a career discovery for me.
So you mentioned all those famous names, delightful people, great mentors, great leaders, but you became leader, and in fact at a very early age. So do you want to just tell us how that happened?
Yeah, I was a mid-career person, I'd say, and I had always thought that there might be a leadership position for myself at that great institution. But the opportunity came a little bit earlier when Dave Barrett left to become the CEO of the Leahy Clinic. And so a leadership position opened up. And I must admit, it came a little bit sooner than I thought it would have. With the support of the senior members of that department, I think, who made it easy, the transition, it became really the highlight of my career.
But yeah, I've obviously, thanks to you, been a visiting professor in the Mayo Clinic, and it is an unbelievably impressive institution. So to suddenly find yourself at a young age that you're now chairman of urology with, I don't know how many urology theaters, like 25 urology theaters in the two hospitals. I mean, it must have been a terrific responsibility. How did you approach that?
Well, I think the most important thing to do is to really look at it as a leadership position and to really understand that. And it was my job to set the vision, I felt, for the next decade. And there's a saying at the Mayo Clinic, when you become chairman, the next day you got to start thinking about succession, about who's going to succeed you. And I really think to be a successful chairman at that institution, that's true. So you have to make sure that you're, working for the current, managing the day basis of urology, but really you're working for what the vision of urology is going to be for the future. So that was an exciting period of time for me. Brought the robot to our department. We subspecialized. We changed the practice and redesigned the practice, moved into a new building. So there was a lot happening at that time, and sometimes it's hard to sit back and catch yourself and say, gosh, did we really accomplish all this in a short period of time? So,
But I want to try and find out why you were selected and what was your vision?
Well, I think leadership is also about trust, and it's also about building relationships. And I think that if I had one good characteristic that I learned growing up in a big family was that the relationship part of it is extremely important. And that the most important thing about what you're doing really is the vision, and that people can feel empowered to make decisions at that level, at the diagnostic and therapeutic level in urology was very important to me. And I wanted people to understand that I valued their opinions and that I valued their input into the department, and that we're all in this together. And so I think that to that extent, that's what makes a strong leader. And it really makes the only way you can possibly, I think, achieve a vision that you've set forth.
You mentioned, of course, the clinical side, and you mentioned the names, but you also mentioned Don Tyndall, who, of course, is archetypal, great head of laboratory. So how did you integrate the two streams, if you like?
Well, this is the thing, John. I think the surgeon-scientist, I think, has changed over the years, and I think it's certainly in my career, when I look back on it now. It's very difficult to be the surgeon-scientist and go into the laboratory and do basic research today. Why? Because I think that what's happening now in basic research has taken off. The technology, the computational analysis that is needed, particularly in the age of genomics. We just can't train surgeons to be top surgeons and to reach that level of understanding of basic research. But on the other hand, if you have someone like Don Tyndall who understands the importance of research to the clinical problems that we face, I found working together as a team, transdisciplinary-wise, and building those teams based on, an organ like prostate or bladder or kidney cancer, I found is going to be the way of the future, where together we're going to, have discovery and bring that discovery to the patients who rapidly, particularly in oncology, need these new answers to their problems with malignancy. That taught me something about the importance of developing highly functioning teams as a leader. And I think it's going to be very difficult for any single one person in the future to do this. My first love is surgery. I love taking care of patients. And in order to do the amount of surgery that you need to perfect the surgery, the amount of time that you need to spend with a robot to perfect that operation, all of these things are extremely valuable to our patients. But in the meantime, any single surgical technique that we're wedded to is really not going to be of most value to the patient. What's going to be of most value to the patient is when we consider the entire cycle of care for that particular problem. So when you have somebody like Don Tyndall who understands the scientific issues, and then he can join our transdisciplinary team to address the clinical issues that we have, the clinical problems, then we're being of value to the patient, because we're finding out what's going to really be important in terms of progression-free survival or ultimately survival to that patient. The young surgeon today, we can only bring an episode of care to a patient. So in order to be part of that entire cycle of care, you need the medical oncologist, you need a GU radiologist, you need to work with interventional radiology and a whole host of other, plus the basic sciences, in order to bring it together for the patient.
Before we leave the leadership concept, you have brought along in the Mayo Clinic a number of younger people. What's your view about how you bring these people along?
The thing I'm most proud of, and I'm sure you are, John, is the people that you bring into the field and the people who you hope you can have some influence on. This is the most powerful thing I think you can do as a leader, is to impact the next generation of care in your department, or the generation that really is going to bring discovery to your department or to your institution. So, you have people like Brad Leibovich and Easton Thompson and Steve Borgen and Jeff Carnes, a whole host that I've worked closely with, Matt Getmans, Amy Krambeck. Each one of them in their own way is really making, the whole of that department what it will be, not just today but in the future. And that's the thing I'm most proud of, is to be able to hopefully influence that generation.
Would I be right in saying that you had more of an idea on that than, say, previous heads?
Well, I think it was timing, John. I was a young chairman, and I did have a senior faculty. So, that was, number one, my greatest strength, was to have their mentorship. But we also knew, and I give credit to each and every one of them, given that they were my mentors, that they believed in me and then actually helped me along the way to make the appropriate decisions and to build that department. And I recall the first time, the meeting that we got together, I had 100% backing, and that's extremely important, as you can imagine, from people who I respected, looked up to, and people who I learned from. We set that initial vision, and we all held to it. I look at it as really not my success, not my legacy, but really their legacy.
I want to find out about your urological heroes. Now, I'm only going to allow you to name one from the Mayo Clinic. The rest have to be from outside the Mayo Clinic.
Well, from Mayo Clinic, the one I worked closest with was Horst Zinke. Mm-hmm. He taught me about, managing the urologic care of the oncologic patient. He was a tremendous surgeon, taught me a lot in the operating theater. I suppose if there's any one career I've patterned myself after, it would be him in terms of major oncologic procedures. And he convinced me that if we were going to make an impact in GU, it wasn't going to be in localized disease, it was going to be in advanced disease. And this is where patients need our help. And I think he was right.
This would be alluding to the famous clinical T3...
exactly. Advanced prostate cancer, advanced bladder cancer, and obviously advanced kidney cancer. Yeah. And we were lucky to be in a situation where we will refer a large number of patients with those problems. To that I give him my gratitude. From my family, obviously, I have to look at, my father, who, him telling about me, regaling me the stories of the time he met Terrence Millen and learned retropubic prostatectomy. In terms of professionally in the United States, John Donahue was a close friend. His approach to the retroperitoneum is one I adopted. I look at him as a great mentor. Andy Novick was a very close friend. I was a close friend for Andy for over 20 years, and I suspect that outside of Mayo, he was one of my major mentors.
Let me now move on to your next job, which is, of course, even bigger. That you mentioned your brother Bob earlier on, and he is the head of urology in Worcester, which is your hometown. So tell us what brought you back there.
Well, obviously, Massachusetts, where I'm being from there, represented an attractive place for me to really enter into a second career. After my chairmanship at Mayo, I joined the Board of Governors. Obviously became interested in organization and interested in administration. I was offered the job of being the director of the Cancer Center of Excellence at UMass Memorial Hospital in Worcester. And I think that my career up to this point has put me in a position where I think, number one, from my standpoint, qualified me to do this job, but also from a urologist brought a perspective that I think is different, but I think urologists are uniquely situated to lead, particularly urologic oncologists, to lead a cancer center. I think that our experience with kidney cancer, really being the model for new drug development for malignancy, is really going to be the model going into the future. Of course, we discovered VHL because of linkage analysis. Now we're in the age where we have genomic technology where these types of discoveries are going to happen extremely rapidly. What I've found is it's opened up a career for me for learning and discovery. I tell my family that I grew up thinking I'd be surrounded by urologists, but really when I look back on my career, I was surrounded with people like Don Tyndall. I was surrounded with oncologists, medical oncologists, surrounded with radiation oncologists, surrounded by GU interventional radiologists. And so this transdisciplinary effort is what I'm trying to bring to the Cancer Center directorship. And I think that that's where I've seen force multiplication of knowledge and experience. And I think that's the most rapid way to discover.
So when you talk about a cancer center, is it a combination of clinical and research, or tell us a little bit about it?
Well, as you know, there's 3 types of cancer centers in the United States. One does just research. They do not see patients. Another type of cancer center in the United States does just the clinical work. A comprehensive cancer center, which is what we strive to be, is one that does cancer care for patients, does the basic research, but does the translational component and does the clinical trials component. So I'm a director of a comprehensive cancer center in that regard.
So the mixture of both translational research, which has obviously naturally taken over from basic science, which we can understand, but you stress the importance there of the clinical trials as well. Okay, so that's what you're doing at the moment, and any ideas for the future?
I am really having a fascinating and interesting challenge, and that's what I've always strived for in my career and in my life. I think there's enormous opportunity out there in cancer. I think things are going to come to us fast and furious with the discoveries that are taking place. I mean, as you know, and you've heard it before, the human genome was sequenced in 2003. It took a year. It took 10 years and took $1 billion. We can do sequencing on cancers now in 3 days at the cost of it's going to be pretty soon almost the cost of a CT scan. So that's unlocking a lot of molecular mechanisms and genetic architecture that we're going to benefit from. And because of that, we're going to really exploit the idea of targeted therapy. And I think when you think it's changing drug development, when you look at the recent discovery published this year in the winter of last year about ALK-altered lung cancers, when I think about it, it usually takes about a decade, and we usually spend hundreds of millions of dollars for clinical trials, and many of them fail. These investigators were able to identify a target, initiate phase 1 to 3 trials in 3 years. And the FDA now is going to approve this drug, crizotinib, for these patients with a bad lung cancer based on that story and that drug discovery. And that's the model that we're in. Because we're able to identify that marker, we're able to do a 2-arm trial of maybe 100 or 200 patients that have a significant number of events. So it shortens the time period for clinical trials. So I think that that's going to be the model for drug development in the future. And with the genomic analysis that's available, these types of discoveries are going to hopefully impact urology in a very big way.
We now move away from urology. Tell us about your other interests outside urology.
Well, obviously, my family is number one, and I do have a son who's in urology. I really respect his dedication and perseverance, and he's at LIJ with Dr. Lou Cavusi, and looking forward to him graduating. So that's a huge and intense interest to me. I have another son in Minneapolis that's launching his career in maybe music or in business. I like to read a lot, carried that with me through my career. Political history, military history.
What are you reading at the moment?
At the moment, I just, at the moment I finished a medical book, The Emperor of All Maladies. It's a New York Times bestseller. But it is history. It's about the history of cancer. And it's a fascinating book. And I think it will get more notice as time goes on. In the past, I have favorite historians that I like to read. I became a real fan of John Keegan years ago. Yeah. David McCullough in the United States and Stephen Ambrose are favorite American historians. But actually, I think the best history is written by a couple of British historians, Paul Johnson and Max Hastings. I think their objective analysis of what our country's been through in 200 years is really quite excellent. And that's probably my favorite historians.
And what about historical heroes?
Well, George Washington, Lincoln I've been a fan of, and Dwight Eisenhower to me. I think leadership, Dwight Eisenhower to me really encompasses who I feel represents the penultimate in leadership. The way he sacrificed and set the vision for something to, obviously that's going to alter our history greatly, and how he carried himself, what he did even after World War II, I think is something that I admire, always admired that.
How do you think he handled Montgomery?
I think he handled him perfectly. I don't think Montgomery was much of a problem as the other egos on the staff at SHAEF at the time. I think he handled it perfectly, and I think that it was really his ability to galvanize the support from the other characters such as Patton and Bradley, and I think he did a great job in that.
So I want to just come back to the Irish connection again.
It's a family legacy. Both my wife and I actually were third and fourth generation Irish in the United States, but my forebears left Crosshaven in the mid-18th century. I had another wing of the family that left after the Civil War and came to Massachusetts. His name was Galvin. He started a newspaper called the Worcester Spy, and it was for all the Irish that had moved to Massachusetts to stay on top of what was going on in England at the time. There's a lot of ties, my wife's family being from Leitrim, and so there's always been this natural affinity for Ireland for us.
Well, Mike, I want to thank you very much indeed
Thank
for
you, John.
a fantastic interview.
It's a lot of fun.
It's really been great speaking to you, and I hope you enjoy the rest of your holiday here in Dublin.